This is India Tonight. Now, 20 years ago, Amir Khan brought to the big screen the life of an Indian farmer. The farmer who was dependent on rainfall, the monsoon as we know it. That movie, of course, was Lagan. But the same small farmer is also the backbone of India Inc. You see, any shortfall in monsoon directly affects all Indian businesses in one way or the other. And this courtesy rural demand, which is a big part of the consumer spending pie. Yesterday, we spoke about Skymet predicting a shortfall in rains. Now today, the Indian Meteorological Department sees a normal monsoon season. So who will prove right? The answer, of course, is going to define the momentum of the Indian economy in the quarters to come. So before we discuss the implications, here's a lowdown on what the Indian Meteorological Department has said. We've put that in focus along with what we've heard from Skymet. In a massive relief, the Indian Meteorological Department, the IMD, has said that India will receive normal rainfall this year. And according to the IMD, rainfall during the southwest monsoon season, or between June and September, that's likely to be 96% of the long period average. Interestingly, IMD's prediction comes shortly after the private forecaster Skymet predicted a below normal monsoon given the threat of El Nino this year. Now, this isn't the first time that IMD and Skymet have come up with contrarian views. Each year, it is often a contest as to who is going to get the monsoon prediction right. But before we analyze this, let's just answer a fundamental question. How is monsoon measured? The IMD classifies its monsoon prediction into three broad categories: normal, below normal, and above normal. Now, this is in relation to a benchmark which is called LPA. That's long period average. The IMD defines LPA as the rainfall that is recorded over a particular region for a given interval averaged over a long period, like 30 years, 50 years, and so on. Since annual rainfall varies from region to region and from month to month, LPA is needed to smooth out trends so that a reasonably accurate prediction can be made. So a normal monsoon suggests that annual rainfall in the range of 96 to 104% of LPA. Below normal talks about 90 to 96% of the LPA. And above normal would be 104 to 110% of the LPA. Now, each year, both IMD and Skymet come up with their own set of monsoon predictions. And like most years, their predictions are on different tracks. Data suggests that between 2018 and 2022, Skymet was closest to getting its prediction right only once, which is in the year 2018. In 2019, in 2021, and in 2022, the IMD's prediction was more accurate than Skymet's. In terms of specific regions, the IMD predicted normal rainfall in East Central, Eastern, Northeastern, and parts of Northwestern India. While in Northwest India, parts of Central West and Northeastern India, the IMD predicted normal or below normal rainfall. So with monsoon a couple of months away now, all eyes are going to be towards the sky to see who gets it right, IMD or Skymet. As far as monsoon rains are concerned, all we can say is the more, the merrier. Well, like every year, we certainly hope the rain gods are kind to us and the El Nino impact remains at bay. But what are the chances that this will happen, and how will our agricultural output get affected, and as an extension, our inflation, our interest rates, our economy? Let's bring in the experts to answer these questions for us. From the Indian Meteorological Department, we have the DGM, Dr. Mrutyunjay Mohapatra, joining us. Also, economist Yuvika Singhal from QuantEco Research is with us as well, along with the food policy analyst Devinder Sharma. Great to have you all with us this evening, and thanks for making the time. This dichotomous view that we get in about the monsoon every year, we got it from Skymet again yesterday and from IMD today, Dr. Mohapatra. Our quandary is quite obvious. It should be obvious. What do you put it down to, this kind of divergence in monsoon predictions, particularly on the subject of the El Nino effect? How profound do you think it's going to be this time? will we have these drier conditions and reduced rainfall? Because really on El Nino depends the outlook of our crops, our food security, doesn't it?
Thank you very much. I just want to mention here that the technology which is utilized by India Meteorological Department for predicting the rainfall forecast of monsoon in the seasonal scale is a robust system. And we have been predicting rainfall for a quite long time based on statistical methods. But for recent years, we have a dynamical framework where we consider the climate models which are best among the world, including the one developed by the country ourselves. So based on these best climate models, we go for a multi-model ensemble forecasting system. And hence, we provide the forecast for the season in different stages. The first stage of forecast is issued around, say, second week of April, and it gets updated in the month of May. And also we provide the distribution of rainfall expected over the different parts of the country. So when I consider this dynamic forecast, it takes into consideration all the various large-scale processes, including El Nino or La Nina and Indian Ocean Dipole, the snow cover, the temperature over various parts of the globe, which directly or indirectly influence the rainfall over the country.
Right.
The statistical methods are based on the historical performance and hence they have a short memory. So the introduction of this dynamical modeling system in recent years certainly has an edge in providing the better forecast for the monsoon.
And that's exactly what we see.
This year.
Yes. No, absolutely. There is no taking away from the process that you follow to be able to make these monsoon predictions, sir. But Yuvika Singhal, you tell us, from the growth projections put out on India so far, how much is the variability that monsoons bring in? And what is the range in which inflation could fluctuate depending on the intensity or the scarcity of rainfall?
So if you look at both the numbers that Skymet and IMD have released, objectively, a 94% versus a 96% of long period average are not very far from each other, the two estimates that is. But I think where a lot of eyeballs are being grabbed is whether one estimate falls in the below normal category and the other falls in the normal category. As an economist, I would still see El Nino and how the shaping up of El Nino will pan out over the course of the next few months. Very recently, we have only seen the risks move into the neutral zone, and we have not really seen an El Nino develop so far. So its development and the timing of it will be very, very critical to us. Whether it develops over the latter months of the summer, where we have already seen the first half of the summer, the Kharif sowing season passed, that will make a very material impact on how the monsoon impact will be on growth and inflation. But to come to answer your question more directly, when we do a statistical analysis and go back in history, we do find in years when we see a deficit monsoon, or if we see years where El Nino actually developing, we do find that it has a negative impact, not just on monsoon, but also on growth. However, when we see the relationship between monsoon and CPI, and more specifically within CPI food, the correlation is not as predicted, or we would presume that there would be a relationship between, like, if monsoon is deficit, CPI inflation would be high. So that kind of a negative correlation is not really seen. And we believe largely because CPI in India and CPI and food within that also, there are a lot of moving parameters and moving factors in any given year. It's not just food, but how the performance of other core, even within food, there are other moving parts, not just cereals, but horticulture, milk, sugar. So there are a lot of moving parts. And not to forget, the government in years when monsoon is actually in deficit and there are risks of inflation shooting up because of that, we do see that government steps in to put in place certain administrative measures to rein in inflationary pressures. So like I said, the correlation between inflation and monsoon is not as we would want or we would expect in our minds. There are a lot of moving parts, and it remains to be seen which of these moving parts which actually overshadow to have an impact on inflation.
So for the time being, let's just turn to Devinder Sharma, because as I understand, I was reading an Economic Times report which talks about nearly half of India's farmland which has no irrigation cover, depending on this annual rainfall that we get between June and September to grow crops like rice, like corn, like cane, cotton, even soya beans. Already unseasonal rains have wreaked havoc with our wheat harvest, sir. So now if the El Nino effect is for real, then how much of a hit on our crop output do you expect this year?
I think, as you mentioned in your initial presentation, that from 2018 onwards, 3 times the IMD predictions have come correct. I only pray that this time also IMD predictions come correct. And having said that, I think it is very important to understand, as you rightly mentioned, that only in the month of March, farmers have suffered a lot because of the untimely rains and as well as the hailstorms, and of course the price crash that we have witnessed across the country as far as vegetable crops are concerned. Now already they have suffered a lot, and if the monsoon also is let's say deficit, then of course this will be a double whammy for Indian farmers. I'm more concerned about the livelihood security of Indian farmers, because Reserve Bank of India can take care of the inflationary impact that we are going to see, but I think where Reserve Bank of India has invariably failed is to see what happens to the livelihoods of the farmers who suffer the consequences of weather crisis or the delayed rainfalls and so on and so forth. I think what we are going to see is like the last year, of course, we know that the heat wave and then of course the shortage of rainfall in certain northern parts of the country. And this year, of course, if the fear that we have that in the month of August, September, something that is being played down by both Skymet and IMD, the impact of El Nino, I think if that turns out to be as normally we have seen across the globe, even studies 5,000 years, have shown how it has transformed not only the agriculture situation, but also political situations over the millennia, I think is an indication that we have to be very watchful and careful about the impact of El Nino. And El Nino going wrong as far as Indian agriculture is concerned could be a double whammy for Indian farmers. And I think that's a situation which nobody wants to see. And that's why I'm saying that we pray the IMD predictions come true.
Indeed, and that's the prayer that we started out with. We certainly hope that those predictions that the IMD has put out today about a regular monsoon are true. Mr. Mohapatra, do tell us, we are constantly speaking about the effects of climate change. We're talking about the impact of El Nino as well. We need to address the causes of climate change as well. Clearly, climate change has a bearing on the way our monsoon pans out. What is the effect and impact of these new weather, these new monsoon patterns that you've noticed in recent times?
Thank you. I just want to add what Sharma Saab told and Madam Yuvika told, that the El Nino is not the only pattern to decide the condition of monsoon rainfall over the country. If you look at the data from 1951 to 2022, there has been 15 years with El Nino conditions. And out of that 15 years, 9 years have been the rainfall in the negative side, that is below normal. And 6 years, there was normal or above normal rainfall activity. So that indicates that about 40% of the years of El Nino can have normal to above normal rainfall activity. And this year, especially if you just look at, apart from El Nino, we have got another phenomena over the Indian Ocean that is called as Indian Ocean Dipole, which is neutral at present and predicted to be positive for Indian monsoon. So it will favor the Indian monsoon rainfall. The third one is that the snow cover area over the northern hemisphere, especially over the Europe and Asia, is a crucial factor. The lower the snow cover, it becomes more favorable for Indian monsoon rainfall subsequently. And this year, during December to March, the snow cover has been less than normal, which is also a favorable factor for rainfall. All these are taken into consideration to provide the forecast based on dynamical modeling system as 96%. Now, coming to your question regarding the impact of climate change, yes, if you look at the data for more than 100 years, which are available in India Meteorological Department digital form, there is no significant change in the total amount of rainfall for the country as a whole. It remains almost same, but random in nature, shows year-to-year variations. but there is no trend of increase or decrease in total amount of rainfall over the country. But if you look at the distribution of rainfall temporarily, and with respect to time within the season, it is found that number of days with heavy rainfall is increasing.
I see.
All tropical countries, and in India also, in Central India and South India, the number of days with heavy rainfall is increasing,
Right.
and number of days with light rainfall or moderate rainfall is decreasing.
Right.
That means the number of days of dryness is increasing. At the same time, the number of days with heavy rainfall is also increasing.
Right.
So if it is not raining, it is not raining. That means dry spell you can expect,
Got
so
it.
drought you can
Yes.
expect. And when it rains heavily, leading to the cloud burst
Right.
or mini cloud burst, or it leads to the urban floods, riverine floods, and flash floods.
So those are the
So therefore,
changes in
Indian
patterns
basin-
that you've noticed, yes, in recent times. And this is primarily because of the climate change that we are undergoing. But you've mentioned a few positives as far as what could help the Indian monsoons. Yuvika Singhal, as far as the RBI is concerned, they've currently gone for a pause in interest rate hikes. Now, if these monsoons are weaker than average, let's consider that scenario. How do you see the policy and the stance changing to what would necessarily require a more concerted effort to contain inflation?
So Vikram, in our minds, I think, like you said, a pause is here to remain in the near term. The risk is obviously on what happens on inflation front and whether inflation is in line with RBI's own trajectory that it has set out for the year. Now, if we assume that there is a downside surprise on the monsoon front, yes, there could be inflationary pressures, especially on food that could build. And we need to keep in mind that a large part of what happens on food is literally exogenous to the monetary policy or the direct impact of monetary policy. It's only through the second order impact that food inflation would have a more material impact on what we call demand side of inflation, that is core inflation. And typically RBI or the monetary policy has a better control, or interest rate rise have a better control over core side of the inflation, that is. So now, keeping these factors in mind, I think what we need is that in case there is a downside in inflation, it's the fiscal and the monetary policy that need to work in tandem. We have already seen monetary policy do the heavyweight lifting last year, having raised rates by almost 250 basis points. I think now the time is to see how the impact of those rate hikes transpire into the economy, especially on the demand side, how they are influencing with a lag. Whereas any kind of upside driven in food inflation led upside in the headline inflation, I think we'll have to see the government step in a more material fashion. We have of late seen open market sales as far as wheat is concerned. We would probably expect the government to be extremely active as far as procurement of wheat is concerned. A few other administrative measures, for example, we have seen in the past where the demand-supply mismatches could be met through either imports or some kind of restriction on exports, a mix of different policies, which largely fall in the domain of the government and the fisc side, could be seen in tandem with a pause that RBI could maintain on a monetary policy front. And that is to say that inflation does see some upside, but it's not shocking us extremely on the upside. So if the quantum of shock is excessive, then we do see that RBI could go back into the rate tightening cycle. We do not rule that out at this point in time.
Yes.
Because clearly RBI has kept
Yes.
the door open for that as well. So if
that,
you
yes.
recall, the monetary policy said
Yes.
it's pause only for now for this policy, right?
Yes, it's
so
only
they
a
have kept
pause.
all their options.
Yes, and Shaktikanta Das has been at pains to kind of emphasize on the fact that it is a pause. It's not the peak yet. We'll have to keep monitoring that situation, and the good thing about these predictions is that it helps us manage better, manage our economy, manage our food supply, and ensure food security. That's essentially what Skymet and IMD are hoping to do, and it's certainly an incredible task that they do for us. Thanks very much for joining us with your perspective. Of course, it remains to be seen about FMCG companies, how they're going to keep their margins against cost pressures in case agricultural yield is lower than average. But all of this are moving pieces. Dr. Mohapatra, Yuvika Singhal, and Devinder Sharma, it's a pleasure having you with your perspective on the monsoons ahead here on this edition of India Tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.